The year is 1177 BC. The world, as it was known, is still standing. Across the eastern Mediterranean, great powers dominate the landscape. Kingdoms that had endured for centuries, stable, wealthy, interconnected, stretch from the shores of Greece to the deserts of Egypt. Trade flows constantly. Ships move copper and tin across open water, feeding the bronze that defines the age. Letters are exchanged between kings who address each other as brothers. Diplomacy, war, and commerce exist in a balance that feels, to those living inside it, permanent. This is not a fragile world. It is a system. And systems, when they work long enough, begin to feel like nature. The Hittite Empire rules much of Anatolia with administrative precision. Mycenaean palaces dominate mainland Greece, their bureaucracies recording every transaction in careful script. Egypt, under the reign of Ramses III, still projects power and stability, its monuments rising as symbols of continuity. Smaller kingdoms exist between these giants, connected through alliances, trade agreements, and shared dependence on resources that no single region can fully supply. Everything is linked, and that is the strength of this world. It is also its weakness, because when disruption comes, it does not arrive in isolation. It spreads. At first, the signs are small enough to ignore. A delayed shipment, a failed harvest in one region, a letter that goes unanswered longer than expected. These are not unusual events. Any complex system absorbs minor shocks as part of its normal function. But the shocks do not stop. They begin to overlap. Trade routes become less reliable. The flow of raw materials slows, then stutters. Bronze, the foundation of tools and weapons, depends on a delicate supply chain. Copper from one region, tin from another. When that chain breaks, even briefly, the consequences ripple outward. Armies cannot equip themselves as easily. Farmers cannot replace tools. What had once been abundant becomes uncertain. Uncertainty becomes tension. Tension becomes instability. And then, in multiple places at once, the system begins to fail. Cities that had stood for generations are burned. Not damaged, not abandoned slowly. Burned violently, completely. Archaeological layers show destruction so intense that entire urban centers are reduced to ash within a single horizon of time. The pattern repeats across regions that had once been connected by trade and diplomacy. There is no single battlefield, no single war to explain it. Instead, there is collapse happening everywhere at once. The Hittite capital, Hattusa, is abandoned and destroyed. The Mycenaean palaces fall into ruin, their administrative systems disappearing with them. Coastal cities across the Levant are attacked, rebuilt, and attacked again. Egypt, one of the few powers to survive, records invasions by groups it cannot fully identify. Peoples arriving from the sea, moving with families, not just armies. They are remembered as the Sea Peoples, but that name explains very little. It describes movement, not origin. It suggests invasion, but not cause. Were they displaced populations, driven from their homes by famine or disaster? Were they opportunistic raiders, exploiting a system already weakening? Or were they something else entirely, a symptom, not the source, of a much larger breakdown? There is no single answer. And that uncertainty is the most unsettling part of the collapse, because empires are expected to fall in ways that can be understood, through war, through rebellion, through decline that can be traced and explained step by step. What happened at the end of the Bronze Age does not follow that pattern. It is too fast. Within the span of a few decades, less than a human lifetime, the interconnected world of the Eastern Mediterranean fractures beyond repair. Trade networks vanish. Writing systems disappear in some regions entirely. Knowledge that had been recorded and preserved through generations is lost, not because it was destroyed deliberately, but because the systems that maintained it no longer exist. The silence that follows is not immediate, but it is deep. In Greece, the centuries that come after are known as a dark age, not because nothing happened, but because so little was recorded. Literacy declines, monumental architecture ceases. The memory of the palatial world fades into legend. In Anatolia, the political landscape reshapes into smaller, less centralized states. In the Levant, cities rebuild, but not into the same network that once connected them. Egypt survives, but diminished, its power no longer what it had been. The world does not end, but the world that existed before does, and what replaces it is smaller, more local, less connected. For those who lived through it, the collapse was not a single event. It was a process, a gradual realization that the structures they depended on, economic, political, social, were no longer reliable. That the systems which had always functioned simply stopped. There is no record of a moment when someone declared that the age was over, but there must have been moments scattered across cities and villages when individuals understood that something irreversible had happened, that the world their parents knew would not return. That is what makes this collapse different. It is not just the destruction of cities or the fall of kings. It is the disappearance of a way of life so complete that for a time, history itself grows quiet. And even now, thousands of years later, we are still trying to understand how a world so advanced, so interconnected, and so seemingly stable could vanish almost overnight.